Të nderuar teleshikues, sot kemi të ftuar një bashkëdhetare e cila ndonse në moshë mjaft të re, ka bërë një emër shumë të mirë në Toronto si trajnuese për marrëdhëniet në çift ose relationship coach, siç quhet në anglisht. Meqense pasqyra shqiptare të rinj shqiptaro-kanadez i ka vazhdimisht në fokus, profili profesional i të ftuarës së sotme jo vetëm që shërben si shembull nga i cili mund të mësojnë edhe profesionistë të tjerë të rinj, por besojmë se biseda do të jetë mjaft interesante dhe informuese, sidomos për çështje të ndryshme të cilat janë konsideruar dhe konsiderohen si tema tabu, për shembull marrëdhëniet në çift. E ftuara quhet Jola Jovani. Mirë se erdhe në emision, Jola.
Faleminderit shumë i lirë. Thank you for having me.
Kemi vendosur të nderuar teleshikues që bisedën për arsye të terminologjisë profesionale ta zhvillojmë në anglisht dhe ju falenderoj paraprakisht për mirëkuptimin tuaj. My first question to you, Jola, is regarding your family origin and circumstances of your immigration to Canada.
So both my parents are Albanian, so they were born in Albania. I was born there too, and we immigrated here when I was 9. And I think the circumstances around the immigration was mostly due to my mom. She wanted, I think, to progress in her own career in finance and as a CPA eventually later on. And I think she also wanted to kind of create a lot of growth opportunities for my sister and I, especially from an education standpoint and things along those lines. So originally when we immigrated, for the first 2 weeks, we actually spent some time with my mom's friend, and she was kind enough to take us in. We stayed in the Etobicoke area, and later on I went to university at it was previously known as Ryerson, and now it's TMU. It was really nice to be kind of integrated into the Albanian community through my mom's friends, and to have that when we came, just because, so that it didn't feel as much of a shock in that way. It was already such a big change and transition. And actually one of the things that I specifically remember is when I was young, I remember seeing Pasqyra Shqiptare on TV, and I think that was super cool because I saw the Albanian community here in Canada, and so again that it makes you feel a little less alone, right? And so that was a really cool experience that impacted me as I grew up here in Canada.
Can you take me through your professional education and how did you get the designation of a relationship coach?
So it's interesting, right? Because at the beginning I didn't even really know that was a thing, right? So my education didn't start with on the pathway to becoming a coach, let's say. Actually, I was kind of following in my mom's footsteps. So she's, in business, and I thought I should pursue something similar, and I enjoyed it. It made sense to me. So I got my bachelor's degree in economics and law from TMU, and then I worked in the financial services industry for a while in a bunch of different roles, anywhere from like sales, IT, operations. During that time, I was entering a new relationship. So I was going through a lot of transitions in my own life, and maybe I felt a little bit lost and confused, and I was going through some challenges. So I remember I really wanted to talk to someone, so I just decided to speak to a therapist. And I got really lucky in the sense that the therapist I spoke to was amazing, and it takes time to find a good match, to have a good experience in that way. And my experience there is what inspired me to kind of go into coaching later on. And the reason is, first of all, I was reminded how much I love everything to do with psychology and human behavior and what makes us work. I was impressed at how practical tools and advice could actually make such a huge difference. And I think that's what I really wanted to share with people. Like, oh my God, I learned this thing, and it actually made an impact for me, right? So from there, I got a coaching certification, and I started working with clients. But I'm also really adamant about doing a good job. I really do love it. I love the impact it has to clients. So I'm now also doing my Master's of Science in Psychology to make sure that everything I do within this field is an evidence-based approach, and I can help people in the best way possible with the right educational background and knowledge.
Jola, what do relationship coaches do?
So
Tell me a little bit about this job. What is your job description?
that's a good question. So relationship coaches. So coaching is very kind of goal oriented, right? And it's future focused, right? And so when I say that, what I mean is when somebody reaches out to me, I really focus on why they're there, what they're going through. And usually people are going to reach out when they're having a hard time navigating a certain aspect of their life, when they're feeling stuck in some way, right? And so the purpose of coaching is to really meet people where they're at, to create a listening ear for them, but also give them, again, those evidence-based approaches and tools to work through the experiences that they're having, right? To challenge their perspective, right? To help them understand, how they got to where they are based on their experiences in their childhood, and, just obtain practical advice in terms of what they can apply that will make a difference and help them feel like more empowered in being able to address whatever it is that they're going through themselves, whether it's in their relationships or other aspects of their lives. So that's really what it's about. It's about empowering people to help themselves move forward.
How old or how new is this job, relationship coach?
I mean, so if you think about it, people have needed to talk to someone forever, right? And people engage in their communities, and that's always a good thing to do still. Coaching has emerged, I guess, or really developed as an industry more recently. In the past, I would say, decade, it's really kind of grown as an industry. It does share some similarities with therapy and other fields like that. I think what has made it so strong is that people really just want to, again, be able to obtain that practical advice, things that they can apply, right? And I think that's why it's grown as an industry. And we just want to make sure that the people that you're working with are also educated or have enough background or experience that they are giving you things based on, the science, right? And I think the other aspect to that, and the reason that it seems newer or it's developed more recently, is that psychological knowledge is really expanding, right? It's really developed, and people have become really interested in terms of, again, like what a good study says or what the science says, and what we learn about our own behavior.
The fact that this new profession came to life recently, is this a sign of having a society in crisis, or just that society is more complex nowadays?
I don't know if I would say it's a sign of there being a society in crisis. I think it's a sign of people leaning on tools and resources and knowledge that's becoming available. I think people really have always wanted to understand themselves, right? I think people have always wanted to know how the world works. They have wanted to know, who they are and how they fit in, right? And we've always tried to make sense of that in a large variety of ways, whether it was like a philosophical approach or whatever it is, right? Just understanding where you fit, understanding how you impact and influence people. And I think now we have a lot more of the necessary language and a lot more base knowledge. And so it's become a little bit more popularized in that way. And people really want to talk about it. And they want to reach out help that they know is likely to help them, right? Knowing that it's available.
Jola, who approaches you first, female or male clients?
So that's a good question. What I should say is that most of my client base comes from content creation. So that's something I do as well. I create quite a bit of content. And the vast majority of my audience is female, or is woman, right? And so I would say over 70% of my audience is women, and so it is women that will tend to reach out. But that being said, I have had men reach out as well, male clients, whether it's directly because they want to show up better in their relationship, or they try to encourage their spouse or partner or girlfriend to come as well. Yes, it is mostly women, but that's not to say that there aren't men who also want to better themselves and want to learn a little something.
Do you think that modern feminism, which sometimes falsely empower women, in my view, has played a negative role in today's couple relationship? I'm referring to the ideology which finds toxic masculinity and patriarchalism as the source of all bad things in society.
So that's an interesting take, and I think what I'll say is, I think feminism, a dose of feminism, is a helpful part of a healthy relationship, and I'll explain what I mean by that. At its root, what feminism is supposed to be about is equality, right? And seeing each other as equally valuable people, right? And so it's you might not be the same people, you might fulfill different roles in a relationship, you might show up differently based on your skill sets or who you are, but at the root of it is the fundamental understanding that you are both equivalently valuable people and you have things that are worth adding to. And I think when we sometimes miss that, right, for whatever reason, it creates a power struggle in the relationship, right? And that can manipulate or show up in a variety of different ways, causing conflict for both people in the relationship. And I think, speaking to your point in terms of kind of like toxic masculinity, this, that, and the other, we hear that a lot in the media. And again, as someone who spends a lot of time online and creates content, I think one of the things that I know is that, if you want to go viral, you want to make good content, you have to have big, bold statements, right? There has to be a little bit of a punch or a kick to it. And so I think that has created a very kind of maybe strong narrative and not a very easy one to have a kind of longer conversation around this, right? And a conversation that I think is very valuable and needed.
What do you hear mostly from your clients in terms of their problems? And generally speaking, what is their age average, Jola?
So my clients are, most of them are in their 30s and 40s, right? And so when they reach out to me, they've usually been in a relationship in a while, right? In a long-term relationship. And I also have clients at the beginning, but for the most part. So what happens when you've been with somebody for a while is that after some time, you kind of start entering these patterns, right? These patterns of kind of like feeling stuck. You do one thing, they do another thing. And so usually what that looks like, for example, the problems that they go through is one partner won't be kind of as involved or won't be as responsive, right? And I actually made a video on this recently. And the other partner really wants that attention. They want to talk about something, they want to do something, whatever it is. And so they'll get louder and louder, right? Like they'll try to get their attention in any way, but maybe the way that they're becoming louder isn't just, they raise their voice, but it's also the things that they're saying to capture that attention, right? And a lot of the time what happens there is that in the ways that they're behaving, it can feel quite negative to the first partner. And so that first partner maybe ignores them even more, right? And so they become louder. So again, you can see kind of that pattern emerging. And so, if you ask partner A, they'll say, well, partner B is actually quite mean, right? And they just attack them and they don't get them. And then, well, partner B maybe thinks that partner A doesn't care, isn't involved, right? And so they enter these types of patterns, and that's why they reach out, right? They do feel stuck. They want to work through it. They want to feel heard, right? And so those are the things that we work on together in recognizing, where did that pattern come from? How did it emerge? What role does it play? And what can we do to create that space of feeling heard, or at least reversing a little bit what's going on, right? And creating grounds for that communication to flow.
How do you know if a relationship is good or if there are issues?
So again, that's also a really great question. I think to answer this one, I'll lean on maybe some psychological background. So the Gottmans are psychologists, and they are really known for their research and their work they've done and their contributions to understanding relationships. And I think for anyone that might be interested, how did they do that? They created something called the Love Lab, and they would examine couples as they would interact with each other and argue, and they would use that information to determine, what makes a successful relationship, right? Or where do things go wrong, right? And so in a good relationship, you are really responsive to your partner, right? So in a good relationship, let's say out of 5 positive interactions, there's room for a negative interaction, right? So that's a good ratio to kind of look at there. In a good relationships, couples come back and repair and work through most of their arguments at least from a place of hearing each other out, right? So in that regard, you're really looking to be in a relationship where you feel mostly heard, right? There's always going to be something that goes on. You feel like you can grow in the relationship. And I think another thing really worth mentioning is that when you think about your partner and talk about them, let's say, you should notice, do you say positive things about them? Do you assume positive intent towards who your partner is or the actions they take? Or when you think about them, do you really think about all the negative things and their negative intentions and the ways that they're out to get you? So that tends to be those few bits there, right? That the 1 to 5 ratio, let's say. It's just it doesn't have to be precise or perfect, but it's more just as a reference point, a guiding point, or the way that you feel about your partner are markers of, hey, this is, we're doing pretty good, this is pretty good for me, or it feels good to be in, versus when that's missing, then maybe it's a good time to think about what's not working, right? You can look around you, or you can reach out for help, right? And that's kind of the whole point.
Okay. I guess you have coached also Albanian clients, right?
Yes, I have.
Given the fact that we have a high percentage of strong families, what role could the family play in relationship?
It's interesting, right? Because community, right? Having extended family, having a sense of community, not just family by blood, but even the people you choose, your friends, etc., plays a huge role in relationships and in healthy relationships, right? Sometimes that community holds up a mirror where you can kind of see what's going on with you and what goes on with other people. Sometimes that you feel good about what you've got. Sometimes you think, okay, maybe there's things we can work on. But also it's support, right? If you go through a long-term relationship, you're gonna come across some hard times. It's just part of life, right? And you're gonna go through life transitions. And when you feel that you have that support, it can really impact the duress that you experience, which then plays out in the relationship, right? So strong community is huge. And actually there was a study from Harvard, a longitudinal study, that examined what factors really lead to a long life, right? Like, what is the number one thing? And I think when I first heard about it, my assumption was going to be that it was diet or exercise, which of course are huge, right? But then the biggest factor, the biggest determinant was a sense of community. It was having that sense of surrounding, right? And knowing that there are people there for you and you are there for people, right? We are inherently social creatures. So I'm not even sure why that was surprising to kind of find out in a way. So it does play a huge role in that regard, and I know that the Albanian community can be quite strong for one another, right? And it can be there for one another, and that can really help in fostering kind of like the trials and tribulations of a long-term relationship. I think one of the things that I'll say is things can still go wrong, right? Even if you have that, and at that point you have to decide, okay, do I, you can engage, of course, your community. Do I get help? And can I work through this? And do I really want to work through this? And most people do. Most people really do want to work through it. I think maybe what I'll add is that, as an immigrant, for example, it can be really challenging to manage a relationship or leave a relationship because you don't want to also lose that community. So navigating all of that can be really quite complex and challenging for people. So there's a lot of pros, but sometimes there's also a few difficulties with it. So again, it's really helpful to talk to someone that can help you figure out what you can do and how to work through it. And again, feel empowered in knowing that you're taking the right steps in kind of the most graceful way that you can.
Is there any particular or singular factor that destroys relationship among young Albanians?
I think what I'll say, I don't think that Albanians experience, relationship issues that are that far off or that different from other people, right? At the root of it, actually, the vast majority of clients I work with, they might have slightly different circumstances, but the core emotions tend to be quite the same, right? So at the root of it, we're really going through a lot of the same type of scripts or similar feelings, right? And I think that's the same with a lot of Albanian people too. Maybe what I'll say from like a cultural standpoint, I know that Albanians, they have a strong sense of pride, right? And I think every emotion or every experience has a place, and I think that's really valuable, right? So I think where that comes from is having a certain sense of self-importance, or maybe really valuing certain things and feeling good about that, and feeling, again, like there are things that you value and that are important to you. The challenge with any emotion is that if you're spending a lot of time there, right? And if that emotion is driving you, as opposed to you using it as a guide, right? And so if we look at pride, for example, on the other side of that tends to be trust, right? And so I'll explain what I mean. You have to be able to trust that, let's say, if you are vulnerable with someone, if you put your pride down a little bit or put it aside for a second, that they will honor that trust, right? Like you open up, you share something really vulnerable and sensitive, and they will be really gentle with that and be really careful with that, right? So what I have found is that when you help people build that trust, whether it's within themselves, that they feel confident enough to say certain things, or within a relational dynamic of any kind, then maybe that pride, which can be loud or sometimes get in the way, can take a step back, right? And it can allow for a little bit more of that relational connection and skill building.
Jola, what is something you are working on right now?
So right now we're working on a number of things. So as I mentioned before, there are a lot of commonalities in the things I teach, right? And so there's a lot of things that I find myself saying over and over again. And so I'm trying to take that information and kind of create like these condensed versions, but still very kind of impactful, and turn it into either courses or tools that people can really use and learn from if somebody wants to engage more in self-learning, right? And wants to work at their own pace or whatever it is. So that's one of the things that I'm constantly working on. My sister and I are launching a podcast in April, and so that's going to be really fun. That one it's going to be, so my sister is actually quite a bit younger than me, so the podcast will be kind of gossipy and really playful and humorous, but it'll still have that kind of backbone of teachable content and the psychological knowledge and relational tools there. And I think, so honestly, I'm super excited about that. And we also have a book that's coming out, and the book was co-authored between myself, my husband, and a therapist. So we're excited for that to come out as well.
From what I'm gathering, you have a very interesting job, but how fulfilling is it to you?
A lot. Honestly, it's a lot. It's very fulfilling. I have such a huge respect for my clients. Genuinely, I'm in awe of their vulnerability and of their willingness to want to work on themselves, to want to be a better partner. And it's a really beautiful thing to see that effort, to see that desire to grow, to see people try. And it warms my heart when I can actually, my long-term clients, and I see people progress and I see them show up differently a little bit each and every time, right? And so that's incredibly fulfilling. And even as a content creator, I receive messages, that like really long messages in my DMs of people telling me, you know what, I watch your content religiously and I've started applying some of the things and they really have made a difference. And they've changed the way that our relationship feels. And again, that feels really rewarding and really, really good to do.
Jola, it was a pleasure talking to you today. I wish you much success in the future. Thank you so much for your time again.
Thanks so much, Adir, for having me. It was honestly such a good time being able to talk about all of this. And I really appreciate the conversation.